Your chat question is up there, and it's on Julia's screen. What question have you always wanted to ask your rabbi about prayer that you haven't asked for whatever reason? And you can see on chat, a number of people have responded. So try and get down some question if you can think of one.
Come to here because we're going to start out. We're going to start out with our beginning prayer, and actually, let me stop this. Unless Ellen, can you? No, I'll go back and do it.
What?
Hold on. I'm just going to mute everybody, and so that we can start and say our prayer together. Oh. So you'll need to unmute. Okay. So we'll go ahead and start our beginning prayer to frame our sacred space here. And you can all say it, practice saying it. Let's see those lips moving at home. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So welcome everybody. I think almost everybody's on by now. So today we're going to start our 3-month unit on prayer. And we are so pleased to have a guest teacher with us tonight, Rabbi Abby Sharovsky, who's a somewhat neighbor of mine in DC. And I sent out her bio, so I hope you all could read that. But I will just say she's the director of intergroup relations for the JCRC. And when I mentioned to her that we wanted to assume in this class no prior knowledge and that she would have to explain the Hebrew words that she uses, she says, don't worry, I work with all these different religious groups and have to explain everything, except when there are Yiddish phrases that there are no good translation for, and you just have to use the Yiddish. So thank you so much for joining us. And I will let you unmute.
Thanks. Okay. Do you want to, here, for the sake of the recording, I'll spotlight. Okay. It's wonderful to meet everyone, and I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Rabbi Abby Sharovsky. I'm Jill Tomar's niece too, which is cool. And I'm a rabbi. I'm a JTS grad, as it says in the bio. I see not everyone may have seen it. I've been here in DC, in the DC area, actually in Silver Spring, Maryland, for the last year plus-ish. And I have the amazing job of getting to spend most of my time working with people who are not Jewish. And I am working with imams and priests and ministers and people who are Hindu and Sikh, and it's fabulous. I absolutely love it. And one of the things, I love Jews too, but there's also something really wonderful about interacting and having this appreciation, understanding for my Judaism as I'm interacting with others of other faiths. And one of the ways that I really feel that is through prayer. And I think working in the interfaith realm has deepened my understanding for prayer, my appreciation for prayer, and also caused me to think and challenge how I pray, what I say, and what are the ideas that I bring to prayer. So I see that there are a lot of really great questions in the chat, responses to what are your questions about prayer that you've always wanted to ask your rabbi, but you never got a chance, or you, for whatever reason, you just haven't. And I wanted to ask that question because I think there's something very kind of awkward about prayer, that we don't necessarily, we do it. I mean, we go to shul. In theory, we go to shul when it's not the pandemics, or we're in some kind of Zoom prayer setting in some kind of way. And we say these words. Maybe we say them because we've memorized them in the Hebrew, or we read the English translation. And there's some of them that are beautiful because the melodies really reach us, because there's a nice idea behind it. But there's also this sense of, this is just kind of weird. And I can see that coming through in some of your questions, that we have an appreciation for prayer. We have an understanding basically of how and why and what goes into it. But there's also this sense that it's kind of still out here. And the thing that I guess like the rabbi question that I would bring is like, does it ever get closer? And for me, at least, I want to say no. It always kind of, at least for me, stays a little bit out here. And I'm okay with that, because that keeps some of the mystery to it. That keeps some of the exploration of prayer going. So there are a bunch of questions. Some of them are more logistic that I see. And like, when do you stand up, and what's going on with all these kadishes, and who decides whether or not we do a silent Amida or we say it out loud, or what's called the Heche Kedusha, which means that you just say the first paragraphs of the Amida, and then go into the Kedusha section where you do Kadosh, 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 and then the rest is silent. And while one of my colleagues will be talking about the Amida in depth in another week, the little secret I'm going to let you in on is sometimes it's just related to time and service flow. And I tell you that to start to demystify some of the pieces of prayer, is that some of these things, while they may seem, is there this huge, ritual or halachic legal reason for why we do this? Sometimes it's just because that works for that time and that moment, and that's okay. There's a certain utility of prayer that's very nice, and we're going to get into that a little bit when we talk about the basic building blocks of prayer. But I'd like to start with a story. So I am I'm a rabbi, yes. I have never had a congregation. Like, I'm not a congregational rabbi, and I love it. And I'm so grateful for that, because I get to have all these experiences as a congregant, and I get to sit there and look around, and it's wonderful. I've worked as a chaplain in hospitals and in hospice, and I've worked in nonprofit settings. So it's really a phenomenal blessing to see how prayer has come up in these settings, and it definitely has. So one time I was chaplaining in the hospital. I was making the rounds. I was a resident at a VA hospital in Manhattan. And I went into one patient's room, Jewish man, a veteran, and as a chaplain resident, you see everyone. You don't see necessarily just the Jews or just the Catholics, or see everyone. And I walk in his room and I say, "Hi, Mr. So-and-so. Wonderful to meet. I'm Rabbi Abby. I'm the Jewish chaplain here today. How are you doing?" "I'm doing fine, Rabbi. It's good to see you." "Well, what's going on?" "I'm sick." It tells me his whole thing. I said, "Okay, well," and we're talking a little bit. I said, "Well, you're having this surgery tomorrow. Would you like to pray?" "Rabbi, Jews don't do that. No, don't do that. Please. What are we doing?" And I said, "Okay, well, can I say a Mishaberach for you?" "Oh, yes, please. Thank you, Rabbi." And what I learned in that experience was, when I said, can I pray with you, or can we pray? He immediately turned off. He got very scared. That felt like something that wasn't Jewish at all. When I said, "Can we say a Mishaberach? Can we say the prayer that you would say in synagogue at the Torah for the sick, this very known fixed prayer?" He was immediately more comfortable and said, "Yes, of course." I mean, it's still a prayer. I was still praying with the guy, but it was something for him, just hearing those words and hearing the difference between pray, which had this very alien, not Jewish, not familiar feel to him. And when I immediately put it into the Hebrew and put it into a structure and a context, he was all for it. And that, I think, tells us a lot about how the majority of Jews, I would like, and I'm going to make a broad assumption, say the majority of Jews think about prayer, that we don't necessarily feel comfortable with this, just let's just be creative and pray on the spot. We're going to get to that in a little bit, though. We need to start with something. And we start with these building blocks of prayer. And I'd like to, if you have the sheet, we're going to look at it. And I think that's why when we think of prayer, we think of Jewish prayer specifically, we want to have a structure because of things like the basic building blocks of prayer. We are set up to be in a liturgy, a ritual space that has a sense of order, that has a sense of something that is known, repetitive. We like it, and that very structure gives us a sense of comfort and grounding. So let's take a look at what that structure is. All right. So, oh, that's very little on my page. I'm going to bring my sheet over then so I can see it a little better because it's very tiny. So we have the Bracha Formula, and we know this Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. And it's very common. It's, we just said it a little while ago. We can see it has this biblical piece. It comes from somewhere. It wasn't just made up, in the last 200 years or so. This was, or excuse me, not 200 years, 300 years. Not hundreds, sorry, 1,000. I'm at the end of my day already. So you're getting me after a whole lot of intergroup relations stuff. We have this structure that's coming from a place of coming from a historical context, from the Bible, all the way into Chronicles, which is already really late, all the way at the end of the Tanakh, at the end of the Hebrew Bible. And we're seeing this need already for people to want to, for the Jewish people to want to have some kind of way to formally address God. And I saw that you read Entering Prayer, or you're reading Entering Prayer. I had flashbacks to my time at JTS having to read Entering Prayer when I saw that you were reading that. And I was, here we go, sorry, I'm trying to just see some people. I was thinking about one of the pieces that they talk about are these methods of prayer that we had earlier in the Bible, where you have just people calling out. Abraham calls out, Sarah calls out. We have Hannah's prayer in 1 Samuel that we read in the Haftarah on Rosh Hashanah, which is just this open, plaintive prayer for a child. But immediately we go to these building blocks of prayer, and we've left this biblical model as it's moved on. We've moved into let's have structure. And we're coming together as a people, we really want structure. So when we talk about
share it again. I can share it again when you want. I just wanted you to be able to see people.
Okay.
While you were talking.
No problem. I talk. That's cool. So there's also the other piece that I'd like to point out is this difference between bracha and prayer. And this is something I think that, at least in the handout and in the materials that you have here, it kind of glosses over a little bit. And we look at brachot as these building blocks. But I also want to make sure that we're giving a little bit of space for some of this we like to call it extemporaneous, this spontaneous kind of prayer that can happen. So, but let's start with the building blocks, because it's a, like we said, we all like to have some kind of structure. So 3 types of brachot, and if you want to bring it back, you can. It's is it helpful to have the sheet on the screen share? Okay, yes, we're getting it. So if Julie, if you could bring it back up. Great, thank you. So we have these 3 types of brachot. We have the brachot nehenin, which are these blessings that we say that are connected to our senses. They're the ones that we say when we're having something to eat, when we're seeing something, when we see rainbows. My personal favorite is the one that ends Oseh Ma'aseh Bereshit, where we thank God for wonders of creation, Oseh Ma'aseh, which are the things that were done that you did Bereshit as acts of creation. And you say it when you see something beautiful in nature. And I like to say it when I see the fall leaves. It's something I enjoy that. Then you have Brachot HaMitzvah. So these are the ones that you do before you do something that is commanded. So if you're lighting Shabbat candles, Asher Kidshanu B'mitzvotav, that phrase, those 3 words at the end, the Asher Kidshanu B'mitzvotav, are usually your clue that, well, not usually, they are your clue that this is something that has some kind of commandedness to it. So it's thank you, God, who has Asher Kidshanu, who has given us this commandment, or who has Kidshanu, sort of made us holy in the way of doing what you are commanding. So it's a very interesting way of looking at it, as it's not just that we're commanded to light candles, or we're commanded to blow the shofar or sit in a sukkah. It's that we have a certain amount of holiness that comes from being involved in this act. And saying a prayer, the blessing like that, not just it kind of elevates that and reminds us that these aren't just any candles. These aren't just, the candles that we're lighting because the house smells a little musty. We're lighting these candles because they're creating a sense of kedusha, of holiness in this day, in this time. And we're able to use a bracha like this, a blessing like this, to help make these distinctions. And then let's go to the next one. Brachot, Hodza'ah, blessings of thanksgiving, with petition or praise. That sounds so formal. When really it's the fun stuff. It's Hallel. The psalms and singing, most of the Siddur are these petition and praise, and you'll learn more about those, I believe, when you talk about the Amidah and go through what are the different blessings that you say every day, and you say as part of daily prayer. But what's interesting is how much of the things that we do every day, the ones that how do I say this? The brachot that are in the Siddur about petition and praise, and that make up so many of the prayers that we've heard on Shabbat or in a daily minyan, something like that. They have this back and forth of petition and praise, asking and thanking, whereas the ones that were the brachot that you might say, let's say over going back to candles, something that's a home ritual, or sitting in the sukkah, also a home ritual, have more of this sense of commanding and obligation. And it's interesting to me to think about what does it mean that these things that we do ourselves, you don't need a minyan to light candles. You don't need a minyan to, your 10 people to sit in a sukkah. And you can still say that bracha. A lot of the prayers in the Siddur, you do need that sort of community, or you are being led by someone else in that petition and praise cycle. So it's something that that's very striking to me. What does it mean that the obligation is something that we can fulfill on our own versus the petition and praise can at times require more of a community? Of course, we can pray on our own at any point, but I think we're more familiar and often more comfortable being in a community for those prayers. So I want to take, I've put out a lot of information, and I'm thinking about how I kind of had mapped out some of this in my head. And I would, do you have it set up so we can do breakout groups?
We could. I mean, I can just do it randomly, quickly.
Okay. So, because I would, just going through this, I would love to, there are two questions that in going through the materials, one that was more provided by the materials, the other that I developed in going through all of this. And the two questions that were resonating for me were, how does reciting a blessing change the experience? And how does reciting a blessing impact our relationship with God? So I would really love to give you some time to explore that in groups. I can put the questions into, let me put the questions into the chat so people can see them.
Rabbi, do you want the groups moderated, or because there are 3 of us that could moderate them, or we could break it up into smaller groups and have people discuss it?
I'm fine with smaller groups. I tend to trust to trust people. I'm fine to pop in and out and around if people are okay with that. But the only time I've ever had to do moderated stuff is when I work with teens, because they're teens. Stuff happens. So, but I'm fine giving people space to talk.
Can you repeat the questions that were discussed?
Sure. I put them in the chat as well, but I'll repeat them.
We won't see them once we move to the breakout rooms in the chat.
Didn't we get them? You sent them to us.
One of them was sent, the first question on the discussion questions.
No, all 3.
Well, no, I made some changes. So.
Oh, okay, sorry.
They are there, but if you'd like to respond to those as well, you certainly are. I look at this as this is your time. I am here to help you with what you would like to learn, but not push my own ideas, but it's totally up to you. But
if you have a cell phone handy, you can look at the chat and quickly take a screenshot before we go into the room. And that way, if we lose it while we're looking at our screen.
Or what you can do is highlight it and then Control-C to copy. And when you go into the room, you can use that chat and Control-V, and it will be in the chat for your room.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes.
Well, the easiest is at the bottom of page 36, question number 1, and then you can add the words to it, and how does it change our experience with God? And just add those words and you got the 2 questions. It's all number 1 in the bottom of page 36.
Thank you, Ellen.
Cut right to the chase.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start the rooms.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in 10 minutes. everybody back? I think so. I think we're all back.
I love your background.
So, okay. All right, welcome back. I hope people had a good discussions. I was able to get into 3 rooms. So if I didn't get a chance to go into your room, it's sorry. Hopefully another time. Hopefully we'll have more opportunities to learn together, and I'll go to the other rooms. So here, I'll do a spotlight. And okay, so one of the third question, if you were looking at the handout, but if you weren't, that's also okay. Is there a place for both spontaneous and fixed prayers? And one of the groups that I was in, conversations, there was a little bit of talk of spontaneous versus fixed, and spontaneous kind of came up as it's saying something, it's saying a prayer when, something happens, you're not expecting it, or like if you're in nature, the prayer might be spontaneous. And yes, there's also this wonderful thing, extemporaneous prayer, where as some of my Christian colleagues like to say, the Spirit just fills you and you just speak, and what God wants you to say will come out of your mouth. So it's and I bring that up because I think it's a very difficult thing for many Jews to wrap their heads around. Just curious, and I can actually, I'm going to put this in gallery view for a moment. Has anyone been to, I realize that everyone here is coming from different backgrounds, different perspectives. Some people were born and raised Jewish. Some people came to Judaism on their own different points in their life. And some people may have been born Jewish, but not come to this place of Judaism until another point in life. But has anyone ever been to church? Okay. Yeah. Anyone been to like what's considered high church, like Episcopal church, Catholic church, Mass? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone ever go to like one of these like Christian mega churches where there's like the rock bands and the thing? Yeah. Okay. And then there's one of my favorite
a gospel church.
Well,
in
I'm getting
Holland.
there. One of my favorite church experience, though, really,
Right.
It was at John Wesley AME Zion Church in Washington, D.C. The pastor there, and I got to actually speak from his pulpit, and it was like the best rabbiing experience, because it's not just everyone sitting there like,
Right.
No, I got an amen. I got a yes. It was awesome. And I highly, highly recommend it.
What was the name of that church?
John Wesley AME Zion Church. Pastor Chris Zacharias. Great guy. But the best was that there were all kinds of different prayer experiences happening that morning. One of them was liturgical dance. That I don't see going over too well in our conservative shuls. I didn't quite get that one, but okay. It's okay. It works for some people. The other one, but just watching people feel truly moved and just feel very moved, and that the prayer was something that really just took them over. And it was a beautiful thing to watch, and it was a beautiful thing to see. I also really appreciate the sort of the pomp and circumstance that I've seen at in Catholic churches at Mass. I was in Rome, a number of years, a while ago. It was a long time, 2010. It was 2010. Trying to remember. Free children. And we were at St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican, and just wandering around looking at the art and looking at the beautiful pieces there. And afternoon mass was starting. They do like a small little side mass, and I nudged my husband. I'm like, look, they're doing mincha. Let's go watch. So, and we watched, because there's something about being a prayer spectator that I really enjoy. I'm clearly meant for interfaith work. There's something about being a prayer spectator that is very, it can be very moving. It can be slightly boring because you don't know what's going on exactly. And there's something that's very other, but there's also something that, when I said, oh, it's an afternoon service, it's mincha. I know that they're not referring to it as mincha, but this idea that there's services happening at different times of day, that they have a prescribed order, they have a prescribed reason, and that there's some universality about that. It's like, oh, I get that. I get why they're having this mass right now. I get that there's a liturgical order to the mass, and I get that there's this certain opening and closing. It's a whole lot shorter than any kind of Jewish service, that's for sure. But I get it. And there was a comfort that I could feel in going through and seeing the ritual of another faith and having a chance to be that kind of prayer spectator. But let's talk a little bit about that extemporaneous thing, because it's one thing when we are a spectator. It's another thing when we are when we're kind of placed in the situation to pray, just God help me and be there for me and do these things for me. And we don't exactly like to talk about it. We all do it, but we don't exactly talk about it. And I think there might be a little bit of a fear that it will seem weird or somehow not Jewish if we do that. And and we get a little uncomfortable with changing prayers, myself included, which is why, I know that there was another section of the handout, this contemporary variation on a traditional form, that I read through, and I said, I don't know that that's where I want to go. That didn't feel comfortable to me. Personally, for me, I don't exactly agree with what it was Marcia Falk, I believe. Yes. With what she's saying and what she's writing. I don't change the liturgy. I don't put in, feminine God language on things. I keep it very rote in that way. But that's me. And I think that she brings a lot of good points on what it means to personalize and get into a space with prayer. But for me, if I'm going to get into a place that is helping prayer, that is making it more personal, I'm going to push myself to do it in a way that is acknowledges keeps the Hebrew one way and acknowledges something different, maybe in a language in which I am also comfortable, like English. So that took a little bit for me to get okay with it. Is it okay to pray in English? I think as we're taught, it's like, okay, you got to learn Hebrew. You have to we do this all in Hebrew, and Hebrew as, Lashon Kodesh, this holy language, the literally holy tongue. And yes, we do want to pray in Hebrew. So when the opportunities come up to say things in English or to pray in English, it somehow can feel a little bit less. And yet I find that there have been experiences where the prayers in English have been just as powerful, if not more, than the prayers in Hebrew. Maybe it's because of the place where they're coming from, who's saying them, or just that that's what I need in that moment. So there are two also sort of prayer constructs that are not, they're not necessarily, they're not Jewish ones, that I've learned to grapple with as a rabbi with a prayer life. So the first one, has anyone ever had someone say for them, I'll pray for you? Yeah, okay. If you live in the South ever at all, I'll pray for you. Or, you know, the other one that I like is, or I didn't like, the I'll pray for you, get like a little bit of, kind of gets a little squirmy sometimes, little weird feeling. The other one that I did not understand this one at all, let me pray on this, or I'm just going to pray about it. I'm going to pray. Just, has anyone ever heard that? That let me pray on this for a little bit. Yeah. And it's this sort of, this weird idea of like, what does it mean? Like, I'm going to pray on this. I mean, as Jews, we just talked about the building blocks. We say over something that we are commanded to do, or we're some sort of level of holiness and elevating an action to a level of holiness. We say it as a way of thanking, as a way of praising, as a way of acknowledging the sort of the beauty and the things that we take in with our senses. But this idea of using prayer as this tool of mulling over something is very, I didn't get it. And it took a horrible experience for me to really understand this whole idea of praying on something. So I have two kids, some of you have heard, and in between my first and my second child, I was pregnant, and I realized early on that the embryo wasn't developing, and the technical term was a call it whatever you want, it was a miscarriage. But there was this week in between when I went to my OB, and she's reading and she's checking and she's reading and she's checking, and she's like, let's just wait a week and see what happens. And that next week, statistically speaking, I'm sure I'm not the only one on this call who has experienced a miscarriage. And there's that kind of in between limbo, horrible state of like, what is and what isn't, and what can I do about this? And I knew, in my heart of hearts, I could do absolutely nothing about this. And in my rabbi pastoral piece, I'm thinking, do I pray? What do I even pray for? I mean, do I pray that whatever is going on passes? Do I pray that this fetus, the embryo at that stage, continues to develop? And if it does, is there a problem? I don't know what to do, because also this is completely out of my hands. Deep down, I knew that this pregnancy was not going to continue. And I realized at that point that that's what I will pray on it was. I couldn't ask, I knew that I could not ask for the pregnancy to continue and then continue to, knowing that it more than likely was not, and then look at it as this, why did God do that? But I also couldn't do nothing. So I ended in this space of just, God, this is not going to go well. This will be what it will be. And I simply need to have the strength to get through what it is. And that was this feeling of praying on it, or I'll pray about it. I just needed to get through, sometimes moment to moment, sometimes, day to day, to be able to really just be with the fact that this was painful, that this was something that was beyond my control, and that I needed to just let go and as they say, let go and let God. And I don't want to say it worked, because that's sort of a messed up thing for me. That's not my theology. But it was this moment of, okay, prayer is just going to be there, and sometimes it's just going to hold you. There was a question of are the prayers answered? And I think the answer I heard from one of my teachers at one point was, yes, the prayers are answered, and sometimes the answer is no. And that's hard. That's a hard theological prayer, relationship with God type of thing, to think that we're praying, we're putting all of this stuff into it, and sometimes we just get told no. So that's it's a hard reality. And I think it's a reality that as adults and as women, taking on this new understanding of obligation within the Jewish community. What does it mean to enter into prayer? It means that sometimes you're going to be told no, and you're not going to like the answer, and you will end up with prayer that will feel frustrating. And that's the it might not be the prayer that you're looking for, but it's the whole, you can't always get what you want, but you find sometimes you get what you need. So that's sort of where I go with prayer. And to be very honest, I struggle with prayer all the time. I struggle sitting at my home during the COVID. And when someone in one of the groups said it felt weird putting on a talit and praying, yes, I agree with you 100%. It feels very weird doing that in Zoom services. But sometimes we also get the prayer that we need. Sometimes we get the answers that we don't want to hear, but we're able to sit there and be with it. And I think that when we talk about entering prayer and what does it mean to really examine prayer, we're putting ourselves in a space where we can engage with these difficult concepts and be able to engage in a difficult conversation with God. And there was one question: why is there so much talk of punishment? Why is there so much, how do we pray with kavanah? How do we get in there? And I think you get to kavanah, to real intention, to that real space of like being in it, when you're able to realize that this is not perfect and it's not always going to feel good. So it's a scary thing. And when you're ready to do it, it can be very powerful and very, very freeing to be able to get into that space. So I've said a lot, I put a lot out there, and I want to leave some space and time for your questions as well. Any follow-up or, yeah, that's what I have.
Thank you so much. I wonder if I guess people can unmute and ask questions, but if you could go back up to the top and maybe hit some of the questions that you didn't get a chance to answer in the chat. You touched on it a little bit, the one about how to make prayer relevant and real. And I know some people were posting about B'nai Jeshurun in New York, and that the synagogues that attract all these young people, and it is in that dancing, singing spirit. And is that, you think that's a direction to make it relevant and real, or to engaging people in prayer?
So I gotta say, I might be like weird for my generation. I mean, I know I am, but I don't love the singing and dancing. I like the singing. Singing's fun. The dancing, I don't go to services for it to be a scene. For me, when I was living in Manhattan and everything, and living on the Upper West Side, BJ felt like a scene. And I'm like, scene, meat market. Okay. Different times in my life, different things. There is beautiful, wonderful, magnificent prayer that happens there. That happens. There's another community congregation type group, Romamu. Unbelievable music, unbelievable singing. I like to stream some of their music while I'm writing. But there's, for me at least, I find more like a better prayer experience in really good chazanut, like a really good cantor that knows what they're doing and knows how to make you like feel part of all of it. I've been blessed to have two amazing cantors at the shul that I was at in New York, and now the shul where we are here in Silver Spring. Cantor Shayna Postman in New York, and cantor Hinda Labovitz here at Or Kodesh in Chevy Chase. And for me, like that was something that drew me in, just hearing the music that they could bring and the love that's clear in how they pray. That's like, that does it for me. I don't need the dancing. I don't dance. So yeah. Other questions. A prayer that confounds me, one that I disagree with, one that makes you uncomfortable or finds difficult. That's a good question. The idea that when, I don't know if it's so much of a prayer as it is a statement, when someone dies and you say, Baruch Dayan Emet, blessed is the righteous judge, it's kind of like, I get it, but I don't. It's a very complicated, difficult statement, I think, to say when someone dies. But I think that also is part of the beauty of it, that it's such a complicated, difficult time, that maybe like, let's add another layer of difficulty to it. So I think there's some good, some bad with that. So that's one that confounds me. And the original Aleinu, or I shouldn't say original, the Aleinu that's said in some congregations, not conservative ones, that says that they bow to false idols and nothingness, and it's a jibe at other faiths. I don't like that. I'm really glad that conservative Judaism took that out of the liturgy. Do I honestly think anyone hears them? God could. I'm cool with that. The people around us, if I'm being snarky, but like I said, I think that God listens. I think that what I attribute and could possibly understand as God listens, and sometimes the answer is no. Significance of bowing left, right. I'm going to leave that to my colleagues to talk about in another time, because I think they're going to get more into that. And why do we have to repeat so many times? Same prayer multiple times, and one would be sufficient. Amen. Although I will say, I was never a fan of Musaf, like theologically, the idea of this additional service, which is really mostly about having an additional sacrifice on Shabbat and holidays, until I had little kids, and we do not get to shul early at all. So Musaf has now become this time when I actually get to do any kind of praying, because we don't move that quickly on a Shabbat morning. How do we know which prayers to stand up for? Some tell us, like with the opening, but others it seems one must know. Yeah. So I'm in rabbinical school, and I'm at Minyan in the Women's League Seminary Synagogue, and I'm standing there, and all of a sudden it's Shacharit, it's morning, and all of a sudden everyone stands up. And I'm like, what's going on? And then they sit down, and then they stand up again, and then they sit down. And now I have already been admitted to rabbinical school. In theory, I should know all this. I should know this. I have no idea why that happened, but I knew for next time. So, which is a short way of saying, I'm not quite sure. And I'm going to pass that on to another colleague. Please bring that question to them, because I am still trying to figure some of that out. Why do some people stand for all the Kaddishes in some synagogues? You do, some you don't. Minhag, yeah, it's custom. Some people stand. I think there's also a lot of superstition about standing for a Kaddish, standing for, does everyone stand for the mourner's Kaddish? If you stand for the mourner's Kaddish and your parents are still alive, does that automatically make them drop dead? I mean, there are these horrible superstitions that we have as Jews. I think also that thinking about the Kaddishes in between, like the Chatzi Kaddish and the Kaddish Shalem, they serve as like these section breakers in a service. And it could be that, they're not written in Hebrew, they're written in Aramaic. So maybe it has the same kind of level of, it's like saying something in the local language, so it's not as holy. I'm not quite sure, but it's an interesting question, and I could, happy to look into it a little bit, maybe get back to you if you'd like, or can email Julia and Ellen with some links that have some of that information. Okay. So many references to punishment. There's a lot of those in the Amida. I think is Rabbi Garber teaching the Amida? Yes.
I think it's Rabbi Kaufman.
It's Rabbi Kaufman is next week, not next session. No. Yes. No.
The
Rabbi Garber is next. So Rabbi Kaufman is
February.
Rabbi, we want to say thank you. This has been really very, very interesting in so many ways. One last question, which I think a couple of people asked, were you did talk about miscarriage. How do you feel about somebody had asked this, about the newer prayers and dealing with some of these instances in our lives where they've been sort of hidden or suppressed and the prayers haven't been there or been available to those of us who have experienced these kinds of things?
Yes, 100%. So there's a great website, if you don't already know about it, Ritual Well. I'll put it in the chat. Ritual Well, I think it's ritualwell.org. It's out of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, but really it's very open source. People, all kinds of different Jews and like clergy put stuff in. And it examines exactly that. There are all kinds of things that happen in our lives that the very patriarchal prayer system and Jewish historical system did not think about and didn't know how to deal with. It's not that these things didn't happen, as we know. It's that these things simply weren't dealt with because they were viewed as other, as women, as some kind of problem that didn't have to involve the menfolk. So now that the women are taking the leadership, which is awesome, we get to talk about it, and we get to we get to bring up these things and demystify so many of the things that happen in our lives that were deemed like, taboo. So is there a prayer for a first period, a prayer for at menopause, a prayer for all of these different things, like these major life cycle things? Yes, talking to God is amazing. I think it's out of print, but you can usually find it somewhere in the depths of Amazon. But Naomi Levy's book it's so fabulous. There's another one. I left it upstairs, but it's It's called Jewish Women's Prayers, I think, or Jewish Women's Prayer Book. I believe it's by Eliza Lavie, Lavie, and it is a collection of prayers written by Jewish women throughout the centuries that deals with all of these things. And it was like these little, it were the prayers that they didn't make it into the Siddur. Why? Because they're written by the women. So, but they deal with how do you, how does a woman experience certain life transitions? How does a woman experience being in, going through a lifetime? So that's, I mean, there are all these things that are coming up. There are also, I want to say, amazing tshuvot, halakha, like legal responsa that are being developed that also address all of this. So it isn't just that there's prayer. Women are actually, like, we're making this huge imprint in being able to say there are ways that and spaces where we need to recognize that women's experiences are valid and need to be marked and recognized. So, and it's all phenomenal. It's really, really great.
Thank you. And as you come up with questions, all right, keep a list, and we'll revisit a lot of this, and see how we can maybe get back to some of our rabbis who've been so wonderful with inspiring us in so many ways here. Thank you. This really was, you can tell by the comments here how well received this was.
Thank you, everyone. It was a lot of fun learning with all of you, so thank you.
Anyway, seriously, questions, now you have the place and the space in which to ask these questions, so jot them down. Julia, you want to pick up from here?
So we just want to go over homework for the next class, which I don't have the date right in front of me, but will be in January. And we'll be talking more about the structure of the prayer day with the 3 services and the structure within each service, the structure of the service.
The date is the 14th.
Yeah, January 14th.
Okay, thank you.
First day of Shabbat.
So for that class, you'll need to read chapters 6 through 9, continuing on after this week's in Entering Jewish Prayer. So the next 3 chapters. And what we're going to ask is, we're going to start putting the homework under the Bat Mitzvah section on the Women's League website. So if you have not ever gone on the Women's League website, please try to log in. You'll need a password. If you don't know your password, you can email Razel Kessler, Kessler, KESSLER @WLCJ.org, and she can help you get on, give you a password. When you log in, you'll be logging into the members only section of the website. And then there's a listing there that says download member materials. And then that's where you go to look for the Bat Mitzvah section. So
we'll
if you have
put this on a sheet, so
right, you won't have to remember it all. And I think one time, maybe next class, if we have time, or if you want to get on early, we'll actually show you how to get on. But this was like, try it on your own first. Then if you need help, then we can do a show and tell on it. And we'll just post everything there in case you forget what it is, what the homework was supposed to be. A couple of your emails, if you have an AOL address, they've been bouncing back. So some people who said they didn't get the information for this class, it might have bounced back, and that's why.
And that's why we are going to the website. But we're gently going to push you in that direction so that you know that there's some place that if you don't have access to whatever, you can always go there. And, rkessler@WLCJ.org. Razel will give you the password, and from there it's really pretty easy. It sounds a lot harder than the actuality.
And then
will we get the Zoom number from them again too, or?
The Zoom is the same every month. So if you just take the email that I sent and put it in your calendar for every class, you'll have the Zoom for all of the Bat Mitzvah classes. It's the same every time.
And one last thing, we are beginning a new semester of Hebrew classes. So if you have some issues with the reading, basic reading and so forth, we are starting to think about publicizing, and you really do have that requirement, certainly as far as basic reading skills. So be sure you sign up early, sign up quickly, sign up numerous times, do whatever you need to do. But let's get you into some of those classes, okay? So think
And
about
then
that.
I mentioned it when I sent out the information for this class, but we realize this is a lot of information for you, and we're only meeting once a month. So sometimes it's a little difficult. If you have any questions, anything was unclear, confusing, please reach out to one of us so that we can help you out. And we don't want you to leave this thinking, oh, this is not for me. It's for people who know more than me, or whatever the issue is. Please reach out.
Will the Hebrew class be, I mean, like beginner Hebrew, or do they expect
different
you to know?
levels, and that's all going to be publicized next week.
Thanks.
There'll be a lot of different levels. We're very blessed, to use the pun. Next session, we have about 8 or 9 people who said they would teach for us, which is wonderful.
Wow.
And, on a volunteer basis, that's incredible.
Can I ask one more quick question? What is the Rabbi Garber? What is her name? That's my maiden name.
We could
Ilana.
Next time, Ilana Garber.
Oh, okay.
Next time. Anyway, thank you, everybody.
And
Rabbi,
wait, hold on. The registration for the Hebrew will be out toward the end of this month. And before you disappear, we did our opening prayer to set the sacred space, and we need to close. So, Rabbi, would you lead us in Kaddish D'Rabbanan? We've gone through the first 2 paragraphs, and now we're going to add on to the part that nobody knows how to do.
Okay. So
I'm going to share it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And say the whole thing?
I think we're up to sharing the whole thing.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me move forward. Where's the next page? Whoop. Okay. And
okay. Let's see my ceiling because I'm going to stand up for this one. Okay. Yitgadal v'yikadash shmei Rabbah.
Amen.
Shemei Rabbah.
Yama
Dibra.
Te.
Mama
Te. Chayachon.
Melechon.
Hayed
Obey Israel.
Amen. Yehei Shmei Baba Mamorat Le'olam Maya.
Barak Yishtabach Yisar Yisbad Yisardar Yishalei Yisrael Yidekudashah
Gabrichu Le'elam Mikol B'chata V'shirata Tush B'chata V'nechamata V'niran B'yama B'imru. Amen. All Yisrael, Al Damadam, Yal Kol Tamadei Tamadei Kol Mandir Sabarita, Divrata Hadar, Jane Diva Kol Atar Atar, Yehei Le'olam Shalom Shlama Rabba Tina Vasifista Rachakamin Wachayim Achin Befab Ana Min Kodem Urahan Day Ishmaya Bimru Amen Hey Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya
Oh, say
Shalom Bimara Huya Aseh Shalom Aleinu V'Yakol Yisrael Bimru Amen.
Amen.
Obviously, it's a lot harder with Zoom. We need to kind of figure this one out a little bit, but we really should be keeping this unmuted. So
well,
that
I realize
somebody asked that question. we need to try to get to a point where we're a little bit more together. So I know that Rabbi Wallensfield's during the day when we're doing Psalms and Pirkei Avot and all the rest and the Kaddish, we've tried to just, some of you are rushing, some of you are slower. We want to get everybody so they're much more fluent in this. We'll figure this out. Julie and I will kind of discuss this. We may break this down into smaller units and just do it that way rather than the whole thing. We'll revisit that. Anyway, anything else, Julia?
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you again, Rabbi. Wonderful
Rabbi,
class.
thank you. Feel free to join us anytime you want. If you want to, jump in with us and listen. Thank you. We really appreciated it. And everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and, partake of everything that Women's League offers. There's a lot here. And when you see the thing about the Hebrew classes, sign up. If you have the need to do so. And some of you, requirements wise, certainly as far as the alphabet and the reading and the fluency of the reading. Okay. Happy Hanukkah.